Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to tonight's second half. Before we jump into it, though, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's second half, shall we? All right, folks. So tonight's second half is going to be an absolutely just horrific experience. One that I have shared before. The photo that you are going to see in this upload is not the bipedal creature they had an experience with during the night. It's just actually a photo of the wolf that was taken outside of this refinery. And they found it very strange that this wolf was just absolutely huge. And then the night prior, they had a experience with a dogman. So I just kind of want to overemphasize that the photo that you are seeing is not a photo of a dogman. It is a photo of a wolf that was taken at this refinery. I've shared this upload before and said the same exact things, and still people chose to say that's not a dogman, even though I'm saying it's a wolf. But it is huge. It was absolutely gigantic in comparison to wolves that we have in the lower 48. Let's get into it. Today's first encounter. I used to work on the North Slope of Alaska in the oil industry. The work that we were doing required us to travel far out into the Alaskan Petroleum Reserve, which is basically just untamed tundra wilderness for hundreds of miles. The oil companies would build these long ice roads in the winter that would lead to exploration drilling pads. Our job was to go out after they had finished the initial drilling, test the rock formations for their oil-producing qualities. It was March on the slope, while still in the depths of the Arctic winter, with the equinox approaching and day and night cycle becoming a little more even. My flight to the slope was delayed due to a large blizzard which shut down Dead Horse and Kuparik airstrips. I spent 3 days waiting in Anchorage until the storm cleared and we were finally able to fly out. Landing at the Kuparik airstrip, it was evident that a blizzard was more severe than we had initially thought. While whiteout blizzards are common, actual snow accumulation is not. This storm, though, was a monster. Snowdrifts several stories tall ran against our camp housing. Our work trucks and equipment were completely buried in the snow, and it took us a full day to dig them out. As soon as the trucks were free, we were off on our first job assignment. No time for rest in the Alaskan oil fields. Traveling anywhere after a storm this size is definitely a nightmare. To get to the work site, we had a bulldozer escort us, breaking up any remaining drifts as we went. The dozer cleared our work area around the well house and we began to rig up our equipment. It took a little time and soon we were back on the normal humdrum life of Arctic well maintenance. Over the radio, we got a call from the bulldozer operator. As he had left, he had seen a giant black animal heading in our direction. He couldn't tell if it was a wolf or a large dog, but it was massive and moving erratically. In the winter, many animals are not active on the slope. Caribou, musk oxen, and fox are the usual wildlife you'll encounter out in the snow. The animals keep to themselves for the most part, but you learn very quickly to never look the animals in their eyes if they approach you. This goes doubly for the white fox, and I advise you to do the same. Grizzlies are hibernating. The male polar bears are hunting on sea ice while the females are denned up with their new cubs. Wolves are unheard of but rarely leave the Brooks Range Mountains, a couple of 100 miles to the south. Whatever the operator had seen, we would keep watch, but it wasn't our problem. It was a problem for the bear police. We went about our work, albeit cautiously. It's interesting to note that oil companies on the slope have private security officers who, besides being private law enforcement, also try to minimize encounters with wildlife. We refer to them as the bear police, which is a cute name for a rather dangerous job. These security officers are the only personnel on the North Slope, outside of regular law enforcement, that are allowed to carry firearm. Their primary job when encountering large predators is to harass them until they leave. This is done with beanbag guns and loud noises at first. When that fails, or the animal is unusually aggressive, lethal force is needed. We had just settled into our work and forgot about the wolf or dog or whatever that was. I needed to take a leak and jumped out of the truck, walked behind the well house to take care of business. My crewmate came over the radio telling me to get back into the truck. There was a wolf coming out from behind the well house where I had just been, and he was pacing after me. I didn't look behind me. I just ran back and jumped into the truck. I'm not taking my chances, even if it was a crewmate's practical joke. Once inside, I looked out, and sure enough, trotting toward the truck was a large, black male wolf. He approached our trucks and plopped down on the snow in front of us. This wolf looked rough, even by wild animal standards. The right side of his face was mutilated and deformed, missing his right eye and most of his skin and lips on the side of his head. The wound exposed large white teeth, giving him the appearance of a wide, crooked smile. He didn't appear aggressive, but he didn't take his good eye off of us. That one good eye was a bright red in appearance, and it was eerie. The way he just sat there, staring, watching, waiting. We radioed the security officers for help, and like a speeding bullet, they showed up 40 minutes later. The whole time waiting, the wolf never diverted his attention from us. If I hadn't seen him breathing, I would have assumed it was a statue. Security officers arrived and took some pictures for their reports. Then began the process of driving the animal back into the tundra. Truck horns did not startle him. He didn't even flinch. Charging him with the truck did nothing either. They then took aim with a beanbag gun and hit him square in the ribs. The wolf let out a yelp, but didn't get up or move from his spot. The next beanbag hit him in the head, and that jousted him enough to get up and leave. I was able to get a decent picture of this big guy before he left the work site. Security told us to call back if we saw him again. They seemed confident that he would move on and not bother us anymore. The sun was settling and our job was still hours from wrapping up. Working a 13 to 15 hour day is not unusual. You either get used to long hours or you find another line of work pretty quick. I was running the computer equipment inside of the truck, and weird data was coming back from the tools down in the well. They were blanking out and losing signal, and they were reporting data backwards, but diagnostics wasn't indicating any issues. To the computer system, everything was operating normally. I tried a few different things to fix the issue, but it persisted. One of the workers went out to the wellhead to check the gauges and cables, trying to isolate the problem from there. He was outside for not more than 5 minutes before the night was pierced by a long, bellowing howl. This was immediately followed by a high-pitched shriek of our crewmate. Throwing the door open, I was able to catch a fleeting glimpse of a large, dark figure running behind the well house. Our crewmate ran past us and jumped inside, pale, sweating, and full of adrenaline. He tried to relay what had happened. Through his panting, he said he was in the well house checking the cables when someone walked up behind him. Thinking it was one of us, he started a conversation with his back turned. When he got no reply, he turned and he was face to face with a 7-foot-tall black wolf standing on his hind legs. It stood between him and the door, growling. Without thinking, he flung his pipe wrench at the beast and struck him hard in the chest. That's when it let out a howl and ran off. Our crewmate was adamant that this was the same wolf from earlier because its face was mangled in that crooked half smile and that one fiery red eye. Myself and the others on the crew had a hard time believing that he had seen a giant wolf man. We had no doubt he had seen the wolf, but we reasoned that in his panic he hallucinated, that it was upright like a man. But we'd all encountered enough weird things on the slope to never count out the impossible. We radioed the security officers and told them the wolf had returned and waited inside the truck. What else could we do but wait? I wasn't about to go out there and fight Satan's guard dog with a clipboard and a mouse pad. Every time we felt like things had settled down outside, we would hear a growl or something would push against the truck. Periodically, we could see something pacing in the dark just beyond the reach of the work lights. Even though we were inside of a locked truck cabin, it was still a very vulnerable feeling. We were very much trapped. I'm sure it felt similar to what divers experience inside of a shark cage far out in the ocean. All this went on for about an hour while we waited for someone to show up. Finally, coming up the road, we could see headlights of 3 approaching vehicles. The security team had finally showed up, this time with actual rifles. Over the radio, we told them what had been going on. We could feel their disbelief in eyes rolling through the radio. That sass and disbelief soon faded when we explored the work site and found it was covered in fresh, large wolf tracks. The security team split up with 2 trucks headed out to search for the wolf, while the last one remained with us as we loaded our equipment and finished the job. We didn't hear or see anything else that night as we cleaned up, but we sure did keep our heads on a swivel. The security officers didn't find the wolf that night. A set of tracks left off the work site and out into the open tundra. The officers commented that the tracks looked weird. This is due to them only seeming to be back paw prints in the snow. The last security truck escorted us back to the main camp while the others continued their search into the night. For the following week, various reports came in across the oil field of people seeing this mangled black wolf during the day, and at night reports kept coming in of a black beast walking upright and harassing and cornering the workers. Security seemed to always show up minutes too late. During this time frame, many of the Alaskan native workers were getting nervous. One of our friends in the camp workshop was a Niuska, a small Inuit village just west of the oil field. He told us that it sounded just like a Lurek, a shape-shifting creature that can take the form of any Arctic animal while it hunts. He said it was obvious as the wolf was its normal, albeit deformed, animal in the daylight, but transformed into an upright monster after nightfall. The Lurek are thought to be Inuit hunters that traveled too far north and became stuck between the world of the living and the dead. They transformed into evil, deformed men with sideways mouths and eyes. They use their powers of shape-shifting to hunt other Inuit, especially children. The Inuit are weary of wild animals for this very reason. A week following our encounter, the security team was able to corner a wolf on a remote work site. It had attacked and trapped 2 welders in their truck. Both workers had superficial cuts through their snowsuits, but were otherwise fine. Having no other choice, the wolf was euthanized on the spot. Security shot the wolf once, and instead of dropping dead, it charged the officer that shot it. The wolf took 3 more high-powered rifle shots before it eventually collapsed at the feet of another officer. Even then, paralyzed in a now crimson snow, the wolf, still growling through its crooked, wide smile. After several minutes, it finally succumbed to its wounds. The wolf's body was taken to the University of Alaska Fairbanks for dissection and examination. Outside of the facial deformities and gnarled appearance, the biologist concluded that it was an ordinary wolf from the Brooks Range Mountain. How it got hundreds of miles from home and why it stayed on the tundra is completely a mystery. All right, here is that photo that he had taken of this large black wolf-like creature. It is walking quadruped in this photo, but it is huge. I'm not really sure if I believe the report coming out of Fairbanks. Obviously, if this thing was able to take 4 high-powered shots, and it was doing exactly what these folks were saying it was doing, to me it sounds either, yes, it was a shapeshifter or possibly a Dogman. I myself think that I do believe in shapeshifters, but I also believe that a lot of native lore was misinterpreted. I think that, like a Dogman in, upstate New York or, wherever, they may automatically associate that with being a shapeshifter because how often do you see an upright walking wolf? So I think that's when they start to, they don't have a explanation. So let's call this creature a shapeshifter. They might not have even ever seen it shapeshift, but it's logical to them and their beliefs. Once again, just a theory, nothing etched in stone, obviously, but this photograph is absolutely just wild. I mean, this thing is huge. Obviously, it is very dangerous looking. And, wow, I could never imagine being that far up north, that isolated, and having a monster like this stalk me. Tonight's second encounter. This happened 9 years ago in the early spring when I was 15 years old, spring of 2014. I was at a friend's house in corn country, about an hour north of Indianapolis. Nowadays, I'm very familiar with the paranormal, unexplained, having multiple shared experiences with friends, but at the time, I was a major skeptic. I didn't fully process what we saw until years later. I'd come over to a friend's house to hang out like any other time. I brought my pellet gun, he had one as well, so we could go and shoot some moles on his farm property. After a while, his brother joined us, and we eventually got bored of looking for moles. There was a patch of woods, about the size of 2 football fields, a little over a mile away, completely surrounded by empty cornfields with no access points from the nearby road. The 3 of us decided to walk out there because why not? We were bored kids looking for fun. We put some boots on and headed out with our pellet guns. The walk wasn't super far, but it took us a while to reach the woods because all the spring rain from earlier in the week made the field a big mud pit. So muddy, our feet disappeared with each step. Then, right as we walked through the brush surrounding the edge of woods, we saw it. In the best way I can describe this thing, it was a raccoon that was built like a Great Dane. We had seen coyotes and wolves before, but this was not that. It 100% looked like the biggest raccoon we had ever seen. We could tell we caught it off guard because it was just standing there on all fours grooming itself. And then it immediately locked eyes with us when one of us pointed at it and said, "Look at that thing." There was a couple of seconds where we just looked at it and it looked right back at us before it quickly turned around and scaled a 60-foot tree. We lost sight of it in the canopy. When we then looked at each other with this WTF look, like, what was that? We talked about how the way it climbed that tree was what freaked us out the most. It only took a few strides to get up that tree using its front paw/hands to grab onto the tree and lift and launch itself up. The arms were freakishly long and lanky looking while it climbed. It honestly looked somewhat human in the way that it articulated its arms as it climbed, like its elbows jutted out to the sides as it pulled itself up. We talked about how freaky that was some more and decided to keep looking around because even though we were spooked, it was intriguing and we wanted to see if there was any other freaky stuff around. There definitely was. The woods were littered with easily over 100 animal carcass bone piles. Most of them were cows, raccoons, and possum. There was one spot, maybe 25 by 25, that had at least a dozen cow carcasses, ranging from just the bone left to one that looked less than a week old. They were definitely being eaten by something with huge chunks of flesh missing. I know cows get loose all of the time, but damn, if this didn't look like a feeding spot. My theory is that this thing was stealing cows from the local farms for food. There are a couple within 5 miles. We also found a man-made small pond in the middle of the woods, which couldn't have been more than 6 feet wide. A shovel and plastic bucket was sitting next to it. Once we found that, we were pretty freaked out again and decided we better head back because we had less than 2 hours of daylight left, and there was a lot of thick, deep mud to slowly walk through to get back home. That's pretty much it. At the time, it freaked me out a bit, but looking back now, knowing what dogmen and skinwalkers are, I'm just happy we came back completely unscathed. Unfortunately, I don't hang out with those guys anymore, and I tried to go back with some different friends somewhat recently, only to see the woods had been cleared out and there was nothing there. I thought I was tripping out, but I looked on Google Earth, and I could see in its place was dirt and log piles, probably an omen to not chase this thing. I'll take it at face value. I haven't heard of a dogman, but this thing did not look like a dog or coyote at all. I just used the Great Dane as a size comparison, as it was freakishly large and looked like a raccoon. Yeah, it was striped like a raccoon, and it had a face like a raccoon, specifically large black spots around its eyes, stubby, almost rounded ears. It had a bushy fur like a raccoon. We saw it very clearly with no obstructions from only 30 to 40 feet away. It was early spring. The brush inside the canopy was still dead. Now, some folks may be like, what is that, a raccoon, man? Come on, But if you look at what a raccoon looks like, they have a muzzle, you know. This thing was Great Dane sized. So we all know how large Great Danes stand when they stand up. They're 6, 7 feet tall. This may be a juvenile Dogman, gray in color. And we all know that Dogmen don't look identical. They don't all look like the hulking underworld thing that people constantly say they look like. What I saw had a muzzle, but looked nothing like that. It looked, honestly, what I saw looked like it would destroy an underworld Dogman thing. What I saw was just not right. It didn't look like it was from this earth. It looked like it didn't belong. So there are different kind of, people see hyena-like ones. I'm thinking these kids were young, you know, maybe just off the bat, they see this grayish creature that's fuzzy, furry, and, you know, runs up a tree. What do they immediately think? Raccoon. You know, our brain tries to put kind of a face or a name to what we're seeing automatically. Gray, black, fuzzy and furry, and ran up a tree. Raccoon. But it's as large as a Great Dane, possibly 6 to 7 feet tall while standing upright. I'm not going to call it a raccoon man. I'm going to call that possibly a juvenile dog man. What do you guys think? Tonight's third encounter. I was driving out in the country in a back road town of Willis, Michigan. Something quite startling ran in front of my car. It literally was running so fast. Not only was it 2-footed, but it was 7 to 8 foot blur. It was weird how its legs literally went from the foot back to a joint like an ankle, then forward like a joint to our knee. Then it went back to the hip. It made it go so fast, it almost literally went in front of my back road cruising 25 to 35 miles an hour. I watched, but as fast as it was, I made its full body out. Its head had pointy, like upward ears, like a Doberman Pinscher almost. Then its body was like a person, except the shoulders were strong, like a very built man. Its head had remained to point straight ahead like our heads do, but its body was longer because of how tall it was. It had been running like a blurry werewolf, and since it was a full moon, I thought we were a werewolf, but I thought it was a werewolf, but it was running so fast because it had a different shape than people. I wish I could draw. I'll never forget what it looked like. It went in front of my car running into this small back road cemetery. Had to have been a werewolf. I'm not sure what it really was, but as soon as I saw it, my first instinct was to pray and go to the nearest church as fast as possible, so I did. While saying the Lord's Prayer, I trembled, and my body was in fear of the unknown. I stayed at that church and slept in the parking lot the entire evening. I thought that would be a crazy if werewolves had truly, really, actually, physically existed, but I went back later to find out the cemetery was called Child Cemetery, and the name was from the child's family. Most of the tombs had been children of Masonic Templars, for the symbols all had distinct characteristic traits, and the actual percentage of the graves had actually been from children. All had died between 1927 to 1932. I don't know what it was from, smallpox, maybe. But that was the first and last time. I was crazy about this girl. I thought she was talking to herself, but we saw 2 of them running in a field a week later. I thought of shapeshifters and things of nature. I don't know what made that come to mind, but whatever it was just scary. I know people have this just wild thoughts about the Masons, and the people that have these thoughts are not members, so they have no idea what anything is except what they hear from whatever or see on TV. I think the cemetery had something to do about that, but the maybe it was a Jewish cemetery with Stars of David. I'm not saying anything about this person because I don't know them, but the way their explanation was, it was kind of all over the place, and quite possibly, you know how some people just automatically, they see something and they're like, oh, that's that, and when it's nothing to do with that. Terrifying experience, obviously. And it says exactly what we automatically, or not automatically, what we know to be true. These creatures are attracted to cemeteries. I just think that filler information was a little bit much, just random stuff, but terrifying nonetheless. Now I've got a terrifying subscriber submitted Dogman encounter just sent to me yesterday. Let's get into that. Jeff, this is D. I had 2 different encounters. The first one was in the fall of 2015 or spring of 16. At the time, I had worked for Total Security Systems, Signal 88 security franchise, as a gate attendant at the Topeka, Kansas Mandrid store. The time was in the evening, just before closing. I noticed that in a tall tree to the west of the store there was a large shadowy thing on a limb well above the ground. It looked like it had been watching me as I went about my duties. Store guests came and went from the outside lumber yard, and I shut down the guard shack and gates when the manager announced the store was clear of guests. The thing just watched me and stayed perched in the tree. I talked over that night with others, and the conclusion was the thing in the tree had possibly been a Dogman. In October of 2016, I left Signal 88 and went to work at Securitas Security Services USA. I worked from 2016 to 2018 as a patrol officer. In 2018, I became a flex officer. In June or July of 2021, while a flex officer, I was working weekend evening shifts, a couple of weekday morning shifts at the Security Benefit Group's home office in Topeka, Kansas. This building sits between I-70 and Southwest 6th Ave on the south slope of Menninger Hill. I was on foot patrol this particular Saturday evening when I walked across the roof of Building 1, checking the mechanical room penthouse. There was howling coming from the crest or the north slope of Menninger Hill. Menninger Hill is the site of the former Menninger Hospital, a private mental hospital. It currently is home to the Security Benefit Group Home Office, Kansas Department of Wildlife Park, and Tourist District 2's HQ, the Office of Sunflower Foundation, Federal Home Loan Bank of Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Nebraska, and Kaw River State Park. When I heard this howling, it sounded deeper and distinctly different from dogs or coyotes. However, as soon as that howl ended, all the dogs in the neighboring residential neighborhoods began barking and howling themselves. And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed this second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you, and I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we all deserve, and that is because of all of you, and I do appreciate that. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.